child mine.
Just middle, that gentleman at the back, then you, and then the line.
Thank you. Fair position in advance, and that I'm a Liberal Democrat candidate at the election. But I think that
Can't sodas.
sorry, we can't all be. I think the major disappointment with the Labour government has been that they haven't spoken openly about trying to address inequality and what is not quite the same thing, but also social mobility. We have now reached a real low point in someone's prospects in life being determined by their parents' position. And that has to be a major cause for concern, and one that Liberal Democrats are trying to address. And I'm really worried by what Peter said, that we have to accept and try and get used to these wealth inequalities, because there have been so many studies over the last 10 years which have shown that our happiness, our ease with ourselves is less if we don't address those issues.
Well, it's kind of a follow-up point to the last question, but to Peter, the argument about globalisation seems kind of so defunct, because if you look around Europe and the world, there are lots of countries that have higher tax rates, much higher equality, and they're still globally competitive. It's not clear, while inequalities got bigger in these countries, it's not clear that it's the straitjacket that it might otherwise be suggested to be. I just wondered, there was a point that what would Cameron's Britain look like? It's almost like the Labour Party, we kind of have completely lost the debate, and we're already living in a country where we can't even think about kind of more equality as a possible way of spending our money.
Thank you.
I wanted to take up the point about Britishness and the points you raised about not being able to understand what British values were. Sorry, is that better?
Yeah, that's
And I think it's the very values that British people have that attracts people to come to Britain, and I think that that's what I feel most proud of, actually. I think it's the fact that we are really a liberal society, thank God, and we're a decent society, and these are our values, and this is why so many people want to come and live here, and I think that's exactly what I would think was our British values, if you like. I mean, I know that's a small point, but I think that's where we are.
And we have the English language, which is probably the most important one.
Absolutely.
Do you want, well, I agree with you about, sorry, the speaker at the back, that it seems to me that we have been encouraged to believe that globalisation and the forces of capital are things that there's no countervailing force to, and we have to accept them. I think Gordon Brown especially was in hoc to that idea, and Blair before him and Thatcher before him. I think other European countries have not done that. We may all, in the end, be doomed, because Europe may not be the most productive, successful bit of the world in the long run. Probably will happen like that. But I certainly think that politics, one of the reasons that people in this country are really kind of dismissive of politics, so many of them, I think. Well, there's two reasons. One is the media, which, as somebody said, is a disorganised conspiracy to promote public outrage. And the second is the feeling that politics somehow doesn't affect them. It can't affect them in ways that they want to be effective. Now, of course, the BNP makes a lot of that when it comes to migration. But it is true that people didn't feel they were asked about migration. That is a truth. You have to accept that. They were not asked about migration. I'm not talking, it's not about racism. This is, a place like Thetford in Norfolk, suddenly having a large population of people from Lithuania and Portugal. So people feel a sense of the uselessness of politics, really, and it's really hard, I think, for any political party now to counteract that. As for Cameroonian or Cameronian Britain, or perhaps England, well, this is a purely emotional reaction on my part. I think I'm going to hate it.
Let me deal with the inequalities points first. I agree there should be more social mobility. I've already said that. Oxford and Cambridge admissions as examples. But to take the sort of the point about other European countries, well, up to a point. In fact, I think in most of Europe, certainly corporate taxes are lower than they are in Britain. And it's not true in the case of, say, France and Germany, that they're more equal societies. I suspect you're thinking of Scandinavian countries.
Not just, kind of large swathes of continental Europe. And I think we've actually
Well,
got some of the lowest corporate taxes in the world.
You and I have to go to Google and go through all the dust, because I accept the empirical point in relation to Scandinavia up to a point, although even there the direction of travel of the tax system is downwards, but the distinction, and I realise this poses difficulties for people like me, and in a sense this is where I implicitly can see the point to Ian, that it's actually much easier to retain a higher tax system in a global economy if you have a smaller, more ethnically and socially homogeneous society. Because the nature of the political discourse is different. And I do accept that having a larger, more variegated society makes certain kinds of things which depend on political homogeneity and social homogeneity more difficult. I would say it is my judgment that the upside is greater than the downside. I'm not concealing that there is a downside. One of the downsides is the ability of the state to carry a larger part of implementing and paying for and raising money for the public purpose. And I wouldn't conceal that point. But as for the rest of Europe, I don't accept the factual premise. As for values, and I agree with what you were saying, what Ian says. I think one of the things that my book taught me was not that what we think of in our optimistic moments, those of us who have them, of the best of British values, of tolerance, of free speech, of an independent rule of law, and so on. These things are in many countries. The distinction is that we got there first, and if you like, and in a sense, one of the reasons why English language is such a bad asset is because that's another thing we gave large parts of the world. So it's not that the values individually defined and described are distinct, but the historical route to our current values is distinct.